Good morning and a happy Hanukkah. This week's Torah portion is Vayigash, and it begins with the words, Vayigash Elov Yehuda. Judah steps forward to plead the case for his baby brother Benjamin. After Joseph planted the goblet, the royal cup, in the backpack of Benjamin and accused him of stealing it, Joseph, who is the viceroy of Egypt, unbeknownst to his brothers that he is their brother Joseph, accuses Benjamin of stealing the royal cup and says that Benjamin will have to remain a slave in Egypt. And Judah steps forward and pleads on behalf of his brother Benjamin. And he says, I took responsibility for the lad, promising my elderly father Jacob that I would bring him home to him, because he already lost a child, Joseph, his older sibling. And now if he doesn't come home to his father won't be able to survive the anguish and the pain. And therefore let me remain as a slave in his place, but let the young boy Benjamin, let him go home to his father. And of course this breaks Joseph. And Joseph can't restrain and contain his emotions. And he breaks down crying and he says, I am Joseph, your brother, is my father still alive? And our rabbis say that we as Jews are collectively called Yehudim, Jews. We're collectively named after the tribe of Judah, even though we come from all the 12 tribes of Israel. And one reason famously is given is because when Judah was born, his mother Leah named him Yehudah, which means thanksgiving. I give thanks to God. And to be a Jew means to live a life of gratitude. But a second reason is because of this moment. Judah stands up for his brother, is willing to risk his life for his brother. And therefore what it means to be a Jew is to take a stand for your fellow Jew, to stand up for another. And even though Judah made mistakes, he was participated in the sale of Joseph, and then he engaged with Tamar. But this was the turning point in his life when he becomes Yehuda, the champion of his baby brother, and rises to greatness, becoming the leader of all the brothers and all the kings of Israel, down to David and Solomon. All descend from the loins of Judah because of this moment, and this moment defines our identity as Jews, and we're named after Yehuda. And it's so true in every one of our lives. We all make mistakes. We all do things that we regret. But if, like Judah, we grow from these mistakes and we stand up and we are willing to be a defender for others and stand for what is right, this is what is the memory and the legacy of every person. Those meritorious moments when they did what was right, even when it was challenging and difficult. Yesterday, the world lost President Jimmy Carter at the age of 100, the oldest surviving president. And unfortunately, Carter was no friend of Israel. In his later life, he became a harsh critic of Israel, writing a book referring to Israel as an apartheid state, smearing Israel. And then later in 2008, he's the first American president to meet with a terrorist organization. He met with representatives of Hamas in Egypt. But having said that, what we remember about Jimmy Carter, of course, is not just his mistakes, but the good things that he did. And one of the unique things he did was, in 1979, in the early years of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's menorah campaign, where the Rebbe asked that public menorahs be lit in every community around the world. Jimmy Carter was the president who inaugurated the Washington menorah outside the White House. And ironically, he died yesterday on the fourth day of Hanukkah, and it was on the fourth night of Hanukkah in 1979 that he lit the giant menorah right across from the White House, which is still lit every year on Hanukkah, every single night. And therefore we remember the fact that he stood up to publicly light the menorah and to embrace Jews in this country, something that unfortunately many others didn't. Matter of fact, Abe Foxman, who was the head of the ADL, challenged the Rebbe's decision, saying there has to be a separation of church and state and there should not be menorahs on public grounds. And he fought the menorah campaign, so much so that the Rebbe had to take it to the Supreme Court, where the Rebbe won. But Abe Foxman actually on Friday tweeted out, and he said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was right all along and I was wrong. Now with all the anti-Semitism, everyone sees how important Jewish pride and Jewish identity is. and how much the public celebrations of Hanukkah lend itself to Jewish unity and Jewish pride. But there's another story that just came out about Jimmy Carter. You see, in the 1700s in Ukraine, there was a Hasidic Rabbi. His name was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He was a great rabbi. Many of us Hasidim go every year on Rosh Hashanah to spend the high holidays at his grave in Ukraine, in Uman. And a number of years ago, in the late 1970s, the communist regime, which then controlled Uman, decided to build apartment buildings in that location, and they were going to rip up the cemetery with the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And there was a Ukrainian woman who lived there and didn't want her house to be demolished. So she reached out to one of the Breslov Hasidim, whose name was Rabbi Dorfman, Rabbi Michael Dorfman. And she said, the government is going to destroy our homes, uproot us, and the Jewish grave of your rabbi. You must do something. Rabbi Dorfman, who lived in New York, went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask the Rebbe for his advice. And the Rebbe said, the person you have to speak to is Rabbi Pinchas Teitz. Pinchas Teitz was a great rabbi who lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and he founded the Jewish community of Elizabeth, New Jersey. And he didn't know why the Rebbe sending him to Rabbi Pinchas Teitz, but he went to speak to him. And Rabbi Teitz pulled out a letter from his drawer, and he said when Jimmy Carter was running for president, most of the Jewish community didn't take him seriously. They said, he's a peanut farmer from Georgia, he'll never win. But the Rebbe told Rabbi Pinchas Teitz to campaign for him and to establish a good relationship with him, because you never know who's going to win. And sure enough, Rabbi Pinchas Teitz invited him to his community, and the media came, and it was one of the only receptions he got in a Jewish community. After he won, he sent a letter. President Carter sent a letter to Rabbi Teitz, and he thanked him for inviting him to his community and helping him in his campaign. And he said, if you ever need anything in this letter, the doors of the White House will always be open to you. And so Rabbi Pinchas Teitz reached out to President Carter, met with him in the White House, pleaded the case for the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov not to be uprooted. And sure enough, the White House reached out to their Russian counterparts. The Russian government decided to go ahead with the project to build these high-rise buildings, but they left the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov untouched. And that was the merit of Jimmy Carter. And that's what we remember. Despite the terrible things he may have done to spread anti-Israel bias, his good deeds are what live on and can never be taken away from him. And that's why each and every one of us should seize as many moments as we can to do good deeds, because when all is said and done, our good deeds are what are eternal and everlasting. Have a wonderful Hanukkah.